time we appear on camera. Just continuing on the discussion, we had quite a few people in the Arm Wrestling Buzz chat room there, and love to give, when you've got like 150 people or 200 people that are into arm wrestling and they're all in the one spot and the show ends, it's like, where does everyone go? Well, come over here, continue the discussion. So I've set up the page here, so hopefully people will start finding it and joining in. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion on the Arm Wrestling Buzz tonight. We had Travis Bagent, the Beast, who was in appearance, and what an absolute legend of the sport he is. An honor to be able to speak to that man. As a big fan, I think I said during the show, my first experience in arm wrestling was seeing the Pulling John documentary, and the Drew is here. He says, "Sigh." Oh, and Leia is here as well. He says, "Good evening, Battle. Good evening to both of you." There we go. I'm going to put this up on the chat here so that it should come up. There we go. All right. What's with the sigh, Drew? Are you annoyed that I didn't announce that I was going live on the show? Is it? Wow. Making me cough. But no, it was great to have Travis Bagent on the show. And yeah, Pulling John was the first experience I'd had of arm wrestling, and yeah, it was never been on the table before, but just really enjoyed that documentary. And then I remember seeing the arm wrestling tables in person for the very first time at the Arnold Expo in Melbourne, and I was like, oh, that's that thing from the documentary, you know. And it had been a couple of years, and I was sort of standing there watching sheepishly, like, oh, I wonder what this is going to be like. And then one of the guys, Tommy Glacier from Queensland, actually, he was there helping run the event. He's looked at me, he said, "Matt, come over here." And I was like, yeah. He's like, get over here. All right, then, fine. And yeah, went on the table and had a fantastic experience. And that was my very first time ever being on an arm wrestling table, was at the Arnold Expo in Melbourne. So yeah, it all sort of kicked off from there. The Drew says, I could have mentioned it sooner. Yeah, I never know whether I'm going to do it or not. That's the problem, Drew, because sometimes the show might go for 2.5 hours, and you know, I've got to pick up the kids from school in the afternoon, so it may run late. But yeah, we thought we'd jump on it today, but we're getting a few people in here now. But yeah, what did you guys think of the show, the Arm Wrestling Buzz? We had Travis Bagent on there, and Tim Talmadge jumped in for a bit. We were talking about the refereeing, and Scott Wynn as well. Obviously, being involved in the sport for 40 years, which is absolutely incredible. So well done to him, and great to have people of that caliber that we get to talk to in there. But yeah, what was interesting with Travis, and he's talking about his comeback. Obviously, he's got this match, his left-handed match with Derek Smith coming up, which will be an interesting match, because it's one of those things with Travis is that, you know, he's in and out of the sport at this point in time. He sort of floats in for a little while, and then he would disappear for a year or two, and then he would come back in a little bit, and then he would disappear for a bit. At the moment, he's on a bit of a comeback. He's scheduled a bunch of matches. He said that he is using the creatine at the moment. We'd read between the lines on that, but he's going to schedule these matches all to happen within the same 3-month period. So obviously the creatine is one of those cycles where you got to get all your gains in that 3-month period, and then he's probably going to be getting off the creatine for a little while, letting his system recover, which is one of those things that you need to do with that particular product. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that the timing of people having to use their creatine cycles, because, you know, when matches get delayed or people get injured or whatever, you know, if somebody has sort of peaked chemically for that, then obviously they've got to redo all of that again, and it could really sort of throw them off. But it's an interesting side and element to the arm wrestling world, which, you know, it's a lot more openly spoken about in arm wrestling, I find, than it is in bodybuilding or in any other sport really that I've spoken to. The After Buzz. Cheers, Matt, says Captain Obviously. It's great to see you here, mate. I did see you in the show. And yeah, we were talking about the cat orange whistling. I love that. This is one of those fun things with this restream program. It gives a description of the emoji, but apparently it's only the new emojis, not the original ones. But yes, you get a lovely little description there. Cat orange whistling. I actually prefer the description. I think it's funnier than the actual icon, because you get to imagine what the icon would look like. Sort of like reading a book, you're going to imagine it differently to the way I'm going to. Yes, but Travis Bagent having a 3-month period where he's going to be lining up as many matches as he can, and he has done that. So yeah, he'll be facing off Derek Smith first on the left arm, and we'll see how he goes with that, because orange whistling again. Oh, you've written it this time. Very nice. Yeah. Because if Travis gets through the Derek Smith match, if he's victorious, if he goes through well and he doesn't have an injury, obviously that's going to play into his 3-month plan of having as many matches as he possibly can. I'd say he's the favorite heading into that match. Derek is a big guy. He's a very heavy, tall, powerful guy, and he's an interesting opponent for Travis. I think he's the right opponent. It's really going to be the measuring stick as to where is Travis sitting in terms of his ability and his comeback. Because if you struggle with Derek, then it might be a little bit longer before you can start reaching those elite levels again. If he runs through Derek, it's like, okay, well, maybe he's got what it takes to get right back up to the elite level again. So that is the potential, what we're looking at with Travis there. Yeah, especially the other matches that he's got lined up as well after that. I mean, if he does well with Derek, he'd be moving through with confidence. And this is one of the things I wanted to ask before he. Well, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to get your questions in on the show, but yeah, I wanted to ask 2 questions. One was, if he wins all of the matches he has scheduled, where does he go from here? Like, what's the next thing? Is he going to have that 3-month on, and then he will cycle off the creatine for a little while, and then plan another 3 in another 3 months? Is he doing a 3-3-3 sort of thing, or does he just want to do these 3 and then see what happens after that? But if he goes through without any trouble and wins all of those matches, you would think it would kickstart a momentum that he will probably use to continue in the pushing of his career, coming back to the top with left hand. And it's one of those things that you'd love to see it, because Travis Bagent is one of those names. You put that name on a card, people are going to watch. He's entertaining, he's charismatic, he's an interesting man. He has the history, he has the experience, and he's going to bring it when he comes to the table. You're going to get a show, whether he wins, loses, or draws. It's going to be fun to watch, and that's what's so important when you're a promoter or when you're putting on an event. You want people to watch. You want people to be interested. You want people to be invested in what you're selling. So anytime you put Travis Bagent on there, whatever condition he is in, but obviously if he's in the better condition that he's in, the better the show, because if he starts running through people, it's like, well, wow, this is the man. He's back, and he's going to feel it too. He's going to start feeling, that real motivation again. Captain Obvious says, not sure I remember a left arm match for Derek, but can't imagine it being that bad. At 6'8" and 330 pounds, yeah, he is a monster of a man. That's why I feel that he is the right opponent for Travis at this point, because Derek is huge, he's powerful, he's strong, he has the ability to win the match, and it's just whether or not Travis has risen his level back to the point where he can start pushing for the elite. So Derek is sort of sitting just outside of that elite level, I would say. And not a gatekeeper status. I don't like to use that word because I think it's insulting to the athlete, but I think it's probably relevant here in terms of it's a testing ground. It's going to do more for Travis than it is for Derek. If Derek wins, it would be, the result would probably be, I guess Travis is not back at that level yet. But if Travis wins, it's like, this is exciting. Maybe he's pushing back towards the elite. Whereas yeah, it's one of those things, but it would be entertaining. And when you've got a guy that's big, and that powerful and that strong, any time that somebody's like that, that's on a combat sports or powerlifting or any sort of arena, it's a spectacle. And that's why you look at, say, WWF, oh, sorry, WWF from the 1980s, WWE, the wrestling, the biggest guys there are the ones that draw the most attention. You've got your heavyweight guys, big, powerful, strong men. And when you're selling a storyline and some huge dude walks past you in the arena, it's like, oh my God, this guy's absolutely enormous. Even though you know that the match is scripted, it still gives that feeling of, I wouldn't want to mess with this guy because he's a giant. And that's what you've got with Derek Smith here. I mean, the guy is a monster. He's enormous. And so if you're lining him up against anybody, you'd be like, oh my God, how is anyone going to beat this enormous guy? And that's what Travis Bajan is going to be faced with. He'll be lining up against that. So very excited to see how that plays out. Yeah, we didn't get a lot of chat about the King of the Table event that happened on the weekend, but I did enjoy the win from Monster Michael Todd. I think it was another good win for him. I mean, he had the win with Frank Lamparelli, and then he's got the win now against what was his name? Lass. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name. The powerlifting bodybuilder guy who came back into the sport. He sort of pops in and out a little bit, but yeah, great win for Michael Todd. I mean, it was a 6-0. I think the last 2 rounds were a little bit of a mess around round. One of those things with King of the Table, and I'm never been a fan of this, and I've said this since the beginning, is the 6th round regardless. I think is completely pointless. I don't understand why they have it at all. If you're doing a 6th round regardless and somebody's up 4-0, just end the match. Like, why are you having 2 extra rounds where the guys are just messing around? Basically, you get that all the time. It's somebody's up 4-0, they've won the match, they've celebrated. Now both guys are relaxed. They go in and they goof around. They either go and let's do a hook star, let's try something silly, or they just don't try. And you get somebody that lays their arm down twice just so they don't get injured for a 4-2, or somebody's slightly injured and they're like, yeah, I've had enough, I'm not doing the 6 rounds. So why have it 6 rounds? Just have it first to 4. You get the same result. It doesn't make any sense. Lars Rabakin, yes, thank you. I was thinking Lass. One of the guys in our club is called Lass Porta. Yes, I was getting confused. Lars Rabakin. Lars Robot can. Thank you. It says Captain Obvious there. Yes, it was Lars that had that crazy match with John Brzenk, I believe. Here in Australia, there's a clip on YouTube, and it was if you can pin John Brzenk, you win, I don't know, $100 or something, $1,000. And obviously, John's just running through everybody. But then I think the last guy that came up was Lars Rabakin, I believe it was. And Lars has jumped straight into a press and had given John absolute hell. But John still got the win. But I think it surprised everybody that anyone at that time, especially here in Australia, was able to give John any sort of match. It's crazy the level that we're rising now in Australia compared to even 5 years ago when I started. It was, the level of our competition internationally was not at the caliber that it is now. We've got new and improved people. The people are getting better all the time. More and more clubs are coming up around the country, and we've got more organizations that are popping up. Obviously, with AWE, we're trying to spearhead that and get the biggest and best matches that we possibly can on. And that's what we've been pushing forwards for. So we've had the AWE Grand Prix where we had Ulrike Bornman able to shine, the young South African man. I believe he's only 20 years old, just over a year in arm wrestling, and he's already beating some of the absolute best guys we've got here in the country. Unbelievable. So very excited to see him again. We have got the next event in the works already. We've put the down payment on the location, the venue, and we're just starting to line everything up. We wanted to make sure that Ryan's match with Schoolboy was done and dusted before we started planning this one, so that we weren't sort of interfering with his lead up and build up to that match, trying to figure out other things, logistics, and all the rest of it that comes with promoting an event. So yes, very entertaining style of pulling with that event with Schoolboy and Ryan Bowen. Unfortunately, didn't go Ryan's way. We saw what he was trying to do there with the King's move, trying to tire out Schoolboy. I believe from what I could see, my read of the match was that in the very first round, Ryan has met Schoolboy in the center, and he felt his power. He felt that he was not going to be able to overpower Schoolboy. He's dropped into the King's move every round from then on, trying to tire out Schoolboy in that match. Leia says, really cool to hear you getting Ryan a match at your next event. Getting Ryan a match. Yes, well, it does help when Ryan is one of the owners of AWE. But yes, so Ryan will be on. Well, he'll be featured in that, of course. And yes, we'll have Richard Boardman. We're hoping to get as many of the top caliber Australian arm wrestlers and hopefully some internationals on that next event as well. Just putting everything together at the moment. But once it is sort of locked in and we have some official news that we can lay out before you, then we will put it out. But last thing we want to do is say, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. It's like we say, oh yeah, we're going to have John Brasink versus Devin Larratt. That's definitely happening. Of course it doesn't happen, and then everyone goes, oh, I thought you were going to have Brasink and Larratt. You're like, yeah, well, so yeah, you got to make sure that things are locked in before you start going out there and saying it in public. Yeah, it's one of those key promotion rules for all of you that run your own promotion. When you when you start running your own promotion, that is one of the tips I will give you. Don't let the public know anything until it is locked in, because things are subject to change. And we saw that with AWE 1. We had our first event. The main event of that card changed, I think, 4 times, and twice in the final week leading up to the actual event, which was insane. We had Chance Shaw was supposed to be facing Ryan Bowen originally, and then Chance got injured. We had to find a replacement. We found a replacement, couldn't get them in because of visa issues, and then we had somebody else, and they were double booked with something. So yeah, it was a mad scramble. We were lucky enough to get Matawaringi Hannah Morris from New Zealand on, I think, literally 2 days' notice. It was 2 days before the event started, and it was just like, well, who can actually get here in time? Because obviously we live on the other side of the world. So having to take a 3-day flight to be able to get all the way to Australia in time, not to mention all the visa applications and all the rest of it that come with that. So yeah, it was a very lucky thing that we were able to get Matawaringi Hannah Morris to come over, face Ryan Bowen in the main event at AWE 1. Obviously, Matawaringi was able to get the win there, 4-0, and walked away with the AWE Intercontinental belt, although Ryan is actually the holder of that belt at the moment, because Matawaringi went on to face Todd Hutchings at AWE 2, and Todd Hutchings was able to get the victory there, a hard-fought victory. 4-0 was the result, but it was a very, very back-and-forth match. Becoming obvious saying Brian Shaw versus Bowen AWE. Yeah, that's right. New Year's Eve on top of Madison Square Garden. It's going to be amazing. Yeah. Brian Shaw. Well, it'll be interesting. I did see some footage of Brian Shaw and Devin pulling. It was just Brian pinning over and over, but he is looking lean. He's looking powerful. I mean, he's barely able to get down to the table. He's such a monster. You know how some of the shorter people use a step to be able to reach the table properly. Brian needs like the reverse of that. He needs like a trench dug in. They just put a hole for him to stand in so that he can actually reach the table with his elbow. But yeah, so Todd Hutchings obviously won the AWE 2 event and took over with the Intercontinental belt off of Matawaringi Heather Morris. Unfortunately, Todd Hutchings not able to defend the belt due to contract issues, and we had to make that statement that he signed a contract with I think it was Core Sports, or it's I don't know who he signed it with, but with somebody, which restricted him from being able to compete with AWE. And so he was unable to defend the belt. So the belt was up for grabs. And so the Intercontinental belt we put on the line with Mazahir Saidu and Ryan Bowen over in India. We had a match over there in New Delhi, which was incredible. Flew over to India, first time that I've been there, and what an amazing experience. The guys from Pro Panja. So Panja means arm wrestling in Hindi. So Pro Panja, Pro Arm Wrestling. And Pravinder Bas and all of the guys that helped us out there, and the local Delhi club, and everyone was incredibly welcoming. What an amazing experience that was. But Ryan Bowen able to get a very hard-fought victory over Mazahir Saidu. It was at 4-3, I believe. Yeah, went down to the silver bullet. This is the story of this match was absolutely insane. It was 3-3 leading into the last match. Mazahir was exhausted. It was really hot in that room. There's no air conditioning. They've slipped. They've gone to the strap. They've got the strap, and they've started the match. Mazahir actually got a pin. The whole room has erupted, and everyone's cheering and celebrating, but they didn't realize that he'd elbow fouled as he got the pin. So it was actually a restart. So they had to calm everyone down and do a restart on the match. And, Mazahir had given everything he had on that. So they've lined up. So Mazahir's on 1 foul. There's only a 2 foul system. We're going to see the result. Pretty much it's going to be a win or a lose here. And the referees lined up their hands, and then the lights, all the power went out in the building. We put the whole room and everywhere in complete darkness for about 5 minutes, which I was annoyed at, because I thought it was somebody had done it to be able to give Mazahir some extra recovery time. But it didn't tend to make a difference, because when they got everything back up and running again, they started in the strap again, and Ryan was able to catch Mazahir's hit from the start at a very high position, and was able to turn it around and get the win. So he got the win 4-3, and what an absolute war. Both guys ended up on the floor afterwards, breathing heavy. They had people standing over them, waving, air. Incredible moments, and what an honor it was to be there in person, to be able to see that. And all the Indian fans that were there, amazing people. The room that we turned up, there was 800 people there, and it was this huge big hall, and they were playing drums, and they had massive billboards and posters of us, and it was like so unbelievable that was a thing. And I've walked into the thing, and I'm not at Ryan's level. I'm not a champion. I'm not even the best in my club. And when we've walked in, they've introduced us as the Australian champions, Ryan Bowen and Matt Connelly. I'm like, I'm not a champion at all. I'm not that good, really. But it was just wonderful to have a match there. And I went against a young man, a 15-year-old actually, Abbas Rana, who is an incredibly strong, powerful young man, and he'll do big things in the sport. And yes, I knew that he was going to go inside, but his style of hook was different to what I was expecting. We have a guy who must have been steaming hot in there. It was hot. But it was amazing. Everyone was there and they were excited. If you ever had that feeling when you've walked into a room and everyone's looking, but they're looking like they're excited to see you, that was just an incredible feeling. And it was one of those moments in your life where it's like, wow, this is really cool. And it was just absolutely amazing. Abbas Rana. So when we got into the match, there's one of the guys at our club, Taron Broad, that is very, very powerful in the hook, and I had been training with him expecting that style of hook, which is very much in this position and then sideways, like a diagonal backwards kind of pressure. Whereas Abbas's hook felt to me like it went down, like it didn't go sideways. It went down like this, So I'm expecting to defend this way, and I'm getting pulled down, which I was not expecting whatsoever. Yeah, and I mean, it wouldn't have made any difference regardless. He was way too strong for me, but it was just I'd never felt anyone hook that way before. I guess it's a dragging hook, but it was like a press straight down in a supinated position. Never felt anyone else do that to me since. But yeah, strange. I don't know if anyone here has experienced anyone hook in that style, but yeah. But anyway, I mean, I wasn't there. Like, I knew I was going there for the filming purposes for AWE to help promote the match and make sure everything, all the cameras and all the rest of it were running. So when they asked if I wanted to have a match as well, it was like, sure, okay. They're like, if you're coming over here, you might as well. It's like, all right, okay. And I said, just give me somebody who's not really explosive, because I'm not super fast off the start. And they said, okay, well, we've got this guy. He's 15 years old. I'm like, 15? And then they sent a photo through, and the guy's like, a bodybuilder, like, he's the Hulk, basically. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Full beard, everything. Looks like a fully grown man. All right, sure. And he was lovely, a lovely guy, lovely young man. Yeah, I'll be excited to see where he goes in his arm wrestling career. But yeah, what a amazing event to be at. After Ryan's match, the whole 800 people all wanted to come up, have photos, and meet you and say hello, and they were ringing their parents on video call and doing, I'm here with that. It's like, I'm just a local club dude. Like, it was very exciting, very humbling, and I tried to make sure that I was as nice as possible to everyone and give them a good bicep flex and photo and all the rest of it. But yeah, incredible people, and what a wonderful time we had over there. Anyway, so Ryan won the Intercontinental belt from that event, and then we moved over to back to Australia, and yeah, we started doing the underground matches instead of the big pay-per-view events. So we've been putting those out for free. You can see them on the AWE channel on YouTube. So we had a whole bunch of different super match cards that we've done, and we most recently did the AWE Grand Prix, which was a tournament where we got the 8 best guys that we possibly could in the Southern Hemisphere region and put them all in a tournament together. Richard Bourneman from South Africa was able to go through completely undefeated, 4 wins in a row over some of the best guys that we have. We did see some upsets in that tournament as well. I know you guys are probably not as familiar with the Australian pullers here, but that was a stacked tournament with the 8 guys. The only one missing, there was 2 guys that we would have loved to have had in there. Lachlan Adair obviously couldn't compete because of the contractual restrictions, but Mario Tambarkas, we would have loved to have had Mario in there as well, but he had a match scheduled for Knuckles Up, so he was not able to compete. But yeah, the rest of the guys were all national champions, multiple time, and many time national champions, and international experience. And yeah, to win that tournament, it means you got something special. And Richard Bourneman absolutely showed that he has something special. So very excited to see what happens for this young man. We have things lined up for him, which again we can't say yet, but things will be in the works for young Richard Bourneman. But yeah, if anyone has seen, Luca says, has that dude Ben Carroll retired? Ben Carroll, obviously a massive man, has done quite well in the World Championships a few years ago. Haven't seen or heard basically anything really from him since. He lives in Western Australia, which is near Perth. Perth is the most isolated city in the world, so it is not as well traveled. Like, people don't go to Perth as often, I would say, as some of the other major cities. They do a lot of mining work and that sort of thing, that people are sort of coming in and out of Perth for that. And apparently it's a really lovely city. But yes, Ben Carroll, I haven't heard anything from him for quite a long time. And yeah, I think he sort of jumped into the sport just kind of like Lars Rabakin. He does strongman stuff, and then he'll just pop into arm wrestling every now and then. So yeah, not sure if he comes back. I mean, he's obviously a very powerful, strong man, but we'll see what happens. I haven't heard anything from him or Danny Tesh either. Everyone sort of asks about Danny Tesh, but no, he hasn't dipped his toe back into the sport recently either. Mario won the Arizona State tournament, didn't he? I believe he did, and he had some very, very good wins. I think the grand final was against somebody that was either a world champion or had beaten a world champion recently. So it was a great win for Mario Timbakis there. And yeah, he is a Super Mario is what his nickname is, and for good reason. He has a lot of power. Another young man that takes arm wrestling very seriously. He had a very good win against Jason Mallow at Knuckles Up 3. Recently, he'll be at Knuckles Up 4. His opponent has been announced. I can't remember off the top of my head who he'll be facing, but he will be at Knuckles Up again. But yes, Mario Timbakis, keep your ears out for this young man. He is a phenom rising through, and he's probably sitting in the under 100 kilo, whether the 220 category. And he did drop down for the Jason Mallow match. I think that was at 95 kilos or 210 pounds. And so Mario was probably sitting at 107 kilos, and he ended up cutting weight. So what is that, 10, 12 kilos? So 25 pounds, I think he dropped down for the Jason Mallow match. And I'm not sure which category he won in the Arizona State tournament, but it was more than likely the under 100 kilos, if that's one of the divisions that they had there. It was a big weekend for arm wrestling. They had the King of the Table event. There was podcasts going on all over the place that I was jumping in on. And the Arizona State tournament, I've only seen some highlights, so I haven't actually sort of sat down and watched the majority of that event yet. But good to see that Mario did so well. Yeah, Mario Timbakis. And it's so interesting to see that the level of arm wrestling has started to rise here in Australia, to the point where people are going overseas, competing and doing well. Unfortunately, with Lachlan Adair and Ryan Bowen unable to get the wins on the weekend, but still being involved in some of the biggest events around the world and against some of the best people. So Paul Lynn, the absolute monster that he is, able to get the victory 6-0 over Lachlan Adair with was basically six hooks in a row, and well done to Paul Lynn. I mean, that's where we thought Lachlan may have the edge, that he might have been stronger in that position. But yes, Paul Lynn showed that he is the dominant force in the inside lane. Captain Obvious says, looks like a great event, but the tournament stream got very rough. Think the equipment couldn't take the heat. For the Arizona State tournament. Yeah, okay, I'll have to have a look. That's one of those things. We've had the same issues with cameras overheating, and that is actually what happened with Knuckles Up. They had, was it Knuckles Up or MAC? Was it Knuckles Up or MAC? No, I think it was MAC. MAC had a couple of dropouts throughout their live stream, and Muscle Bike, g'day, mate. Says Muscle Bike, great to see you here, sir. Yes, MAC, their PC overheated, and that's why it dropped out, and then it overheated again later on. They managed to get a fan onto it or something. But that's one of those things, is that when you've got your equipment running, and say even if you've done tests and all the rest of it, you might be doing your tests in an empty room and everything seems to be fine. You know, your cameras are good, your PC's good, your network connection's going great. But then when it comes to the actual day and you fill that whole venue with hundreds of people and that heat from everyone that's in there and the yelling and the cheering, and, it does raise the pressure on the technical equipment that you've got. All the lights and everything being on, those rooms get hot. And if anyone has competed on those sort of stages, you find you're sweating just standing there, and it's, there's 50 lights pointed at you. The room is hot. You're in a position where you're about to compete, so you're already sort of, pumped up. That's why you see guys coming out and they might be walking out to the table sweating already. Captain Obvious says, yeah, the audio ended up getting out of sync by 10 minutes. Wow. Wow, that's strange. It's one of those things with streaming, is that you want to have that high end HD, if you can, 1080p definition stream going at all times. The problem with that is it costs money, and it does require specialized equipment in some aspects. So, if you're trying to run it from your phone or from maybe Wi-Fi that's in the venue, it may not be reliable enough for the load that you're putting through, especially if you're streaming in like 4K or something like that. Slasher says, Captain Obvious. Lucas says, you got to be from a country that ends with IA to beat Paul Lynn, either Georgia or Bulgaria. Yeah, that's a good point. Paul Lynn, obviously a very fantastic elite arm wrestler, very experienced, and was able to walk away with a 6-0 victory over Lachlan Adair from Australia. Where does Lachlan go from here, do you think? I mean, he had a good win against Davitt, but coming up against Paul Lynn, and I mean, Paul, it's hard to say. It's one of those things with these sort of sports, with arm wrestling, with UFC, you're only as good as your last match is in the eyes of people, the audience. And when you're going against the best guys in the world, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Unless you're an absolute monster like Levan, even Devin, he's winning and losing here and there. Last year, what did he lose to? Gennady. So it's not that you win every single time. And if you don't win, then you're washed up. But it feels that way from the audience's perception or reaction to people that lose, especially if they lose to somebody when they were the favorite going in. So it is difficult for athletes, I think, in this sport, that the audience is so critical that they'll go, oh, yeah. Like you say with Paul Lynn and Lachlan, face off at the presser was intense, nose to nose. Absolutely. Yeah. Lachlan does like to hype things up, and Paul, obviously no stranger to that, was quite willing to stand there and give it a good stare back, which is great. And that's what makes things interesting from the promotion aspect. If you've got moments like that where it's like, oh, I want to see this match now. Maybe you weren't interested in the match previously, but seeing that stare down, it's like, oh, now I'm invested. These guys are really serious about this, and they want to win, and they're in each other's face. And that by itself can sell you a pay-per-view, sell you the match, sell you the interest or the charisma that you need to get people invested in watching. So it's all those little things combined. But yeah, it was unfortunate for Lachlan to not get the win there. Obviously, hats off to Paul Lynn. He did a tremendous job. I'm not sure where to go for either guy. Where does Paul go from here? Where does Lachlan go from here? I mean, Lachlan obviously, facing off against someone like Paul Lynn, who is a veteran, who is of that elite caliber, but does he face somebody of a lesser caliber going into his next match, and who should that be? And then where does Paul go? Like, who does he face off against next? It is that what weight class were they doing? Under 100 kilos? I think it was under 100 kilos. Well, maybe they didn't have a weight class for King of the Table, but I think both guys are around that 100 kilo mark. So yeah, well done to Paul Lynn. And yeah, Schoolboy, what happens with Schoolboy and Ryan Bowen? Ryan Bowen, obviously we've got the AWE here. We're quite happy to find and put on the best possible matches we can with Ryan. But Schoolboy, where does he go from here? I mean, if you lose to Leonidas and then you've got to win over Ryan Bowen, obviously two very big matches, or audience-wise, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to be watching, because Leonidas is bringing a big audience, and so is Schoolboy, obviously. So he got a lot of views for that. Unfortunately, he didn't get the win. But then you've got the next matchup. He goes against Ryan Bowen, and I know Ryan had several million views on his content leading up to this match. So he's bringing 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, millions of views to lead into this match against Schoolboy, which is great for the promotion, great for Schoolboy to get the win as well, but also good for Ryan because he did get a lot of people to watch his match. But where does Schoolboy go from here? Do we want to see him continue to take on other big social media following guys, or the Drew says Schoolboy versus Ron Barth? Well, that might be interesting. Yeah, well, that would be good actually. I mean, Ron Barth is a veteran of the sport, and obviously he holds a win over Ryan Bowen at the Arm Gods event Valhalla recently. But Ron. He's obviously a veteran of the sport. He's a very an extremely good arm wrestler. But in terms of the viewership, is he going to pull in as many numbers as what Leonidas is or Ryan Bowen is, having that big audience pushing behind him? Or does Schoolboy even care about that at this point? Or does he want to just come along to the event, have the promotion doing all the heavy lifting in terms of getting people to watch and sell the pay-per-views? Because I don't think if you put him against Ron Barth, it's going to be as interesting to the mainstream audience, not because it wouldn't be a great match. It would be a great match, but only because Ron doesn't have as big of a following. And it's interesting that, isn't it, to think that someone like Leonidas, who is only just starting in the arm wrestling world, may be a much bigger draw for arm wrestling purposes than somebody who's been in for 42 years in Ron Barth, simply because of their promotional work and pushing themselves on social media, as opposed to just their arm wrestling ability. And I know Ron is probably not very interested in that side of things and doesn't really care. And especially at this point, he's established himself. He has nothing else to prove in arm wrestling. He's a world champion. He's been at the elite levels. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I would like to see it, but I'm thinking in terms of a promotional aspect, where if you've got another big social media following behind another athlete, that may be more profitable to push as a match for Schoolboy. Excuse me. Phil Woody, finally caught an early morning live. What up, everybody? Great to see you, Phil. And it's fantastic to see everyone in here. It is 2:00 in the afternoon on Thursday for me. It's 12:30 a.m. for the people in America, and one section of America. And the Drew says, or Shaw. So Chance Shaw. Haven't seen a lot of Chance Shaw on the table recently. Have we seen any matches with Chance? I'm not sure if I've seen a Chance Shaw match in quite a while. He had the injury, obviously, where he was leading up against Ryan Bowen for AWE 1. But since then, I haven't sort of been watching too much of what he's been doing. I don't think he has a massive following. I do think he's pushed his numbers up significantly, which is awesome. On TikTok and on Facebook, he's posting stuff regularly, which is great. The tugboat thing, he's really gone ahead with that, which is awesome. It's 5:30 in the UK or in the morning. Wow. Drew here like the constant star. There we go. The Drew is busy delivering orders. Brian Shaw versus Schoolboy. Wow. That might be interesting. That would be interesting. Devin hit his 1 million subs. Did he? Oh, that's cool. What do you get for 1 million? Do you get... I know you get some sort of plaque from YouTube. You know, the little red thing with YouTube written on it, like a trophy. What do you get for 1 million? I think for 100,000, Ryan got one. But it wasn't the red one. It was like silver or something. But yeah, 1 million subs. It's incredible. And what an influential figure he is to the arm wrestling world. It was funny actually doing the podcast with Auden Larratt last week, and he was just set up in I don't know, looked like their kitchen or something in their house. And so Jody and Devin are just sort of wandering through every now and then, and Devin's popped in and sort of said hello for a few minutes, which was really cool. But yeah, 1 million subscribers, that's incredible effort. Trying to get to 1,000 here. If you haven't subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. Trying to get that 1,000 number, but I think we're at 880 or something at the moment. But yes, the comforting fact for me was seeing that Mr. Beast, who is #1 on YouTube, took 5 years to get to that 1,000 subscriber level. So we'll get there, and there's no rush. I'm not in a rush, but it would be fantastic because it does unlock different abilities once you get there. With YouTube, you can stream in different ways. You can put on different sort of super chat stuff. You can do all sorts of different things that are not available when you're under 1,000 subs. Muscle Bike, you get financial freedom, as I understand it. Yeah, that's great. Well, it depends on whether or not you're making content regularly, because you might have 1 million subscribers, but if your channel is not making money, as in you're not putting out videos. But I know Devin does. He does put videos out quite often. So yeah, it's interesting once people get up to that level. You know, you think, like, let me do a 5-minute video or 2-minute video, and suddenly you're getting 10 grand from that. It's like, it's insane, like the levels of income that people can make. Phil Woody says, Muscle Bike, hey buddy, see you in Wales. Muscle Bike, Phil, I can't make it, I'm afraid, but I will be in Atlantic City in March instead. The Drew says, I see Brian Shaw comfortably beating Schoolboy after a couple of months more training. Captain Obvious, you get a gold YouTube keychain and a bottle opener. Really? Doesn't seem that good. Rather than 100,000, the plaque thing was way better. A gold keychain? Nah. I'll be like, oh, yeah, thank you. I'll put that in the bottom drawer where it'll never be seen again. A bottle opener? Okay. Yeah, Brian Shaw. I mean, this is the question with Brian Shaw. How serious is he going to be taking arm wrestling? Is he going to give it absolutely everything and going to take a match and train for it and learn the techniques and step up on the stage and do a first to 4 with ready goes? Or is he just sort of doing it for a bit of fun at this point in time? I mean, he's training with Devin, which is awesome. You know, he's going to be learning a lot of technique. He's obviously one of the most powerful men that's walking the earth. And he's a giant guy, huge hands, world's strongest man several times. What is his goals? What is his seriousness level for arm wrestling? Is he going to try to make this a thing? Because if he does, then sure, he's got all the tools, and it just comes down to learning the foundational movements effectively so that you can implement your strength. You can have all the strength in the world, but if you can't access it, you can't utilize it, and somebody else just blasts through you with speed and they've driven straight into your fingers and driven your hand to the pad, you know, those elements are realistic, especially at the upper levels. And it's almost one of those things where if you're like a massively powerful, strong guy, you don't really want to be taking a match where it's hard. It's hard for these guys because it's like they get thrown into the deep end very quickly. And it's like, you'd almost feel like you want him to have a couple of warm-up matches to actually sort of get the hang of arm wrestling. But it's like, well, he's big and strong. He's the world's strongest man. Yeah, just put him in against one of the best guys in the world. Put him in against, I don't know, let's go against Schoolboy, who's a multiple year world champion, you know, who's no slouch on the table. It's like, oh, well, okay, he might be stronger than Schoolboy, but trying to win that match, that's no small feat. Look at Larry Wheels, for example. Larry Wheels, Schoolboy. Perfect example of somebody being incredibly strong and incredibly powerful, having trained arm wrestling for months leading up to that match, took everything seriously and got destroyed. There's so much to arm wrestling that is not just pure strength. So, Yeah, I would like to see Brian take his time. I'm not sure how far he would go. They're a very good muscle boy. Todzilla started at Shaw's kind of age, so he's hoping. I don't doubt he has the ability, but I'd like to see him take his time and build his way up. I think it'd be so important for him to do it that way, to maybe win a tournament, win the state tournament, then win the nationals, then have like a super match with somebody else. But the thing is that people are going to look at Brian Shaw and they're going to say, well, here's money to be made. And we've got the world's strongest man. He's got a massive following, and you want to capitalize on that and get people watching and make as much money as you possibly can, especially for his debut. So you'd be like, don't waste him going to a tournament, especially like a local tournament, because then everyone will see and get to see his ability, and his interest level may drop by that point, especially if he doesn't win. Imagine he goes to the local tournament and gets beaten. There goes all your potential $1 million paydays. So it's almost like you've got to train him in secret, get him to the absolute best point you possibly can, and then put on the biggest match that you possibly can with him while he's still an unknown quantity, which is in some respects is a little unfair on the athlete, because it's like, I don't get to have this series of building up and learning and gaining experience. I just get thrown in a deep end because of my enormous skill set. But I guess, if you're somebody like Brian Shaw, that's something that you would expect and something that you would be happy with, because it's like, hey, look, you're going to make a lot more money doing this. You're going to get a lot more attention doing this. You're going to get a lot more opportunities for other big matches in the future doing it this way. If you choose to go the traditional route, it may take the shine off of the ability to earn at the very biggest levels. So, yeah. The Drew says Pablo should go and have an unofficial match like he did for Michael Monster. Oh, I always say that. Michael Monster Todd. Monster Michael Todd. Yeah, well, that's one of the things. We've seen that in the UFC, and I should get my UFC swear jar out. But where people have said, hey, look, I've lost a couple of fights. I want to go back to the regional circuit and get a couple of wins, get my confidence back, and then come back to the UFC. Even though they've still got fights under contract or whatever, they may say, look, I'm not feeling it. I don't feel that I'm at the elite level I need to be. I've lost confidence. Let me go back to the regional circuit and get some wins behind me, and then I'll come back. It's rare. It's only happened a few times, but it has happened in the UFC. Yeah, I think all respect to the athletes that do that. If you're not feeling it, if you don't think that you're at the elite level and you want to get some confidence back and you want to go and get some wins again, rather than when you get to those levels, everything is difficult. There's no easy match. You're facing off against the best guys out there. And even if you are one of the best guys, it's still a tough day at the office. You've still got to go into that match and be absolutely switched on, because you're facing somebody who is not only trying their hardest to beat you, but they have the ability to. So it becomes less about the fun side of it and more about that competition aspect, which can really be a detriment to people, especially if they lose a couple of matches in a row. That confidence can drop quickly, and especially when the audience and the fans turn on you so fast. You can be a rising star and you have the ability to get to the elite levels because you're crushing everybody and everyone's on this hype train, and then you have a match and you lose because you went against somebody who's really, really good, and everyone just turns on you and they're like, oh, we knew he was terrible. He was just crushing cans the whole time. And it's like, I only lost one match and against one of the best guys in the world. So, yes, people are very fickle with their opinions when it comes to combat sports. Yeah, if you lose one, oh, he's rubbish. Brian was having Devin do grip stuff. That was funny. he just plucks up the stuff as Devon is maxing out. Yeah, that's insane. Brian is he's like a bear without fur. He's an enormous man, and no surprise that he's been world's strongest man several times. Muscle Bikes is, yeah, that was funny. They have great chemistry, so I hope to see lots more from them. That is one of those great things when you've got athletes from two different sports utilizing and showing their skill set. And that video of Devon and the mountain, jumping on the table that went viral and has millions of views on it. At the time, the mountain was in Game of Thrones, and at the peak of his sort of popularity, he was also world's strongest man. He was setting the world record for 501 kilo deadlift, and he gets on the table with Devon, and Devon's basically laughing at him and just rolling through him whenever he wants, which is just shows you the difference in the abilities of leverage and technique and strength that somebody has in arm wrestling versus just pure strength. So that was a big eye opener, I think, for a lot of people to go, hang on a sec. The mountain is a giant and he's the world's strongest man, and he is getting toyed with by this guy who Devon was probably like 100 kilos at that point, like 220 pounds or something. And he was just rolling through the mountain, just laughing. And yeah, that's one of those things. And he'd probably do the same to Brian Shaw right now. He's letting Brian get pins on him, and from what I can see, but at any point in time that Devon wants to win the match, he can just roll through. But yeah, when you've got the opposite, where you put Devon in Brian's world, where it's like, hey, pick up this thing with 2 fingers, it's like, it's an impossible task. Even from the local level, I remember I was over at Ryan Bowen's house, and with the Pound for Pound company, he has all his merchandise, t-shirts and all the rest of it, but he also had grippers at that time, and he was doing the nail bending and that sort of thing. And I picked up one of the grippers, and I was like struggling to close it. I can't remember which one it was, and he was out of the room at that time. I was messing around with these grippers trying to figure out how to do it properly. And then when he came back in, I said, I've been messing around with these gripper things. And he goes, oh, yeah. And he picks it up, and he's just like, click, 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 like puts it back. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't close that once. So, yeah, crazy. Like the strength levels that people have. And you think, like, so Ryan's doing that, and then somebody else would be able to do that to him, and somebody else would be able to do that to him. The levels just keep rising and rising. You think, how bloody strong could somebody get? It's absolutely insane. The Drew says, Matt, you should have a match with Brian, and you would be perfect. Oh, it would be perfect. I mean, perfectly at getting beaten by an absolute monster of a man. And I think there's a lot more popular opponents out there that would make a lot more money and have a lot more eyeballs on them than myself. But I'd love to do it. I'd love to get on with Brian. Sure, Brian Shaw. But yeah, he's got bigger people out there that he can face, and those events will draw a lot of attention. Would facing off against me draw much attention? Not really. And even from the arm wrestling aspect, they go, yeah, but Matt's not that good. So Jaw has a good sense of humor too. Yeah, he seems like a really good guy. Desmond Green Andrew, one of the Australian arm wrestlers, says, hey, Matt, who do you believe will be the man to beat Levan, or even just win a round against Levan? Well, I think Hermes Gasparini was going to beat Levan, and I think he was on his way to getting several rounds in their match. But because of the rule set, and every time that Levan was in a compromised position, so he was hitting through, and he was taking Hermes' rear, so Hermes was flopped back, but he would get the stop, and then he would start to bring his shoulder around and start pushing back, and he pushed Levan back to the center, and I think from that point on, he was about to surge through to get the pin, but Levan just drops his elbow off the back of the pad and gets a restart. Not a fan of the person who fouls getting a restart. I think it's ridiculous. I think that whole rule set is outrageous. The person who's about to be pinned, so your arm's going towards the pin pad at speed, and you just lift your elbow up, and you get a restart instead of losing. Yeah, I think it's outrageous that is a thing. That's why with the AWE rule set, which I wrote, it is if you foul in that position, then it is a loss. So yes, if you foul to try to get out of a loss, it's a loss. It's called a professional loss. Like if you just lift your arm up like this because you're about to be pinned, that's a loss, mate. Running fouls as well. Always go with the running fouls. But yes, so I think Hermes was in a position where he may have won that match, or at least won a few rounds against Levan. So yeah, but a rematch possibly would be interesting. But under that same rule set, you're probably going to see the same result. Yeah, but as to your question, who else would win or even win a round outside of Hermes? It's tough to say because Levan has looked so dominant, and even against Devon, who had spent multiple months leading up to it with as much creatine assistance as he possibly could, he wasn't able to get around. He had one moment in the first round where he got a stop. And then the rest of the rounds all just went straight through for Levan. I mean, the talk is Brian Shaw versus Levan. Give Brian at least a chance to get on the table and see what his skills are first. It's one of those things where people go, "Oh, who could possibly win? Let's get the biggest and strongest person in the world and put them against him." It's like, as I said before, the technique and the ability to be able to roll through somebody. Brian isn't in the position where he can stop that, especially at this point in his career. Like arm wrestling, he's still learning how to do it. Off that go, you're starting like this. If he's needing to get inside, he's going to get pulled straight out and get pinned straight away by Levan. He's too strong, too good. This is his thing. 180 kilo monster of Levan Saganashvili. Yeah. Who else could face off against him? It's a tough one, man. I mean, the easy answer is to say that no one's on his level at this point in time, and it's almost when Anderson Silva was ruling the middleweight division in the UFC. He was so far ahead that the people he was going against, it was a squash match every time, and these were the number one contenders. Stepping up against Anderson Silva, it was like, you're just gonna, like, what round are you going to get beaten in was the question. He beat everybody in that middleweight division so comfortably, so easily, and it wasn't until years later, and when he was actually messing around against Chris, what was his name? The guy who knocked him out, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Chris something or another. Chris Weidman, and Anderson was goofing around, pretending to be hurt, and then he did get knocked out. But up until then, I mean, he was the middleweight champ and hadn't been beaten for multiple years. And it's like, who are you going to throw to the wolf of Anderson Silva next? It's almost in that same position. Who's the sacrificial lamb that gets to go against Levan at this point in time? Yeah, I think he's just so far ahead of everyone currently. I think the only things that are going to get him is time, an injury, or if some absolute monster just appears out of nowhere and just rises through the ranks and, is on his level or above. And that's going to be pretty bloody rare to find. So, yes, we'll see what happens with that. But thanks for the question, Desmond. Captain Obvious says, that 45 kilo plate sure just picked up at the hub by fingertips like a paper plate. Yeah, he is an absolute monster of a man. The professional foul, says Captain Obvious. That is correct. The professional foul. Captain Obvious says, by the time Brian is ready, Levan might be retired. Yeah, that's true. Well, it's another question as well, is if you're on the top of the sport, like if you're in Levan's position at the moment, what do you do for motivation? Because if you're crushing the number one contender over and over and over, regardless as to who the number one contender is, how do you sort of stay motivated to continue that legacy, if you're not being challenged, if you're not having somebody that's pushing you to the absolute limit. And I know Devin would have been a good challenge for Levan, good motivation. Because he didn't want to lose to somebody that was trash talking him, that was, making all these entertaining videos and content about him. But it was one of those things with Levan. It's like, and promoting him as well. I mean, you say, well, this guy's the biggest, strongest, best armor wrestler that's ever lived, and let's watch him destroy somebody in a match. And it's like, well, the match isn't going to be competitive, so it's, do we have a lot of interest in this? Like, it's hard to build interest when you've got back and forth. Like, if Devin had won that match, that would have been the absolute best possible result. Because it would have pushed Levan to have to get better. And B, because we would have seen a third match, which would have sold through the absolute roof, because now you've got a storyline of 1 versus 1, and this is the rubber match. Let's see who actually has the better skill set. So both guys will be leading into that third match with improved technique and ability and motivation to try to get that win. But obviously Levan dominating Devin again in that second match, so 6-0 and then 6-0. What do you do if you're Devin? It's like, well, I'm going to go find other challenges in a different weight class, which is respectable. It's like I've climbed the mountain and I got towards the peak and I was knocked off the mountain twice in a row. It's time to climb another mountain. Fair enough. Levan's standing at the top, ruling over anyone who's coming up. Levan is a much more technical puller than most people give him credit for, says Desmond Green Andrew. Absolutely, yes. He has the ability. I mean, the guy's not a slouch. He's not a one-trick pony. He's not only 180 kilos and the world's best arm wrestler, but he has the ability to go everywhere and do everything he can. And you can see that in that match where he went to top roll Devin. Devin was sitting in that, I guess we call it a king's move position. Levan thought about it for a few seconds and then he's just transitioned to a press instead. So it's like, if you thought that Levan only had top roll, well, there's your answer. He's just dropped in a press on the number 1 contender in the world in Devin Lara. Lucas says Silver was beating math teachers. Yes, Rich Franklin. I'm sure you're talking about Rich Franklin, who was the world champion up until that point. Yes, Rich Franklin, no slouch of his own, though. I wouldn't just call him a math teacher. He was a multiple-time UFC champion and a very, very dominant competitor. Obviously, he got his nose broken in the Muay Thai clinch by Anderson Silva in their very first match, which really highlighted the effectiveness of the clinch in MMA, probably more so than any other match that has taken place. And yes, the clinch of grabbing the back of the head and pulling in with knees, Rich was not able to combat that at all and got his nose broken and then got knocked out or TKO'd several minutes later. And then in the rematch, you could see that Rich had done a lot of work on how to defend against the Muay Thai clinch. And when Silva did land or grab that position on him, he was able to keep his frame upright. He was able to fight off in a much better method than ducking his head, which is exactly what the person in that clinch wants you to do. But Silva still being too dominant and able to break Rich's nose again and get the win again for a second time. But yeah, it was a very interesting moment in the UFC to see a technique like that being utilized. And it's like this, if you wanted to say, well, give me a great example of the Muay Thai clinch being effective, then you'd look at those two matches. I'm joking a bit. I'm still mad that Silva beat my favorite Hendo. Yes, Dan Henderson. What an amazing fighter he is. And yeah, I'm trying to remember how that match went. But from what I think with Dan Henderson versus Anderson Silva, this is off the top of my head, but I think Dan Henderson controlled the first round with wrestling, and he was sort of pushing to do what Chael Sonnen had done, which is hold Silva down and ground and pound him. And in the second round, I think Silva landed like a straight, which stunned Dan Henderson, and they went to the ground, and Anderson Silva got him in a rear naked choke. I reckon that is what happened. Spider-Man, says Captain Obvious. Okay. Spider-Man, what is that in relevance to? Is there somebody in the chat that is Spider-Man, or is something that I said? I'm trying to think what that could possibly mean. Don't know. Captain Obvious is not obvious on this one. Maybe that's who Levan should go against next, is Spider-Man. There's so many. You remember all the old fights well. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes. A lot of people are probably not aware that I'm an administrator for MMAJunkie.com, the website, which is obviously covers all the MMA events out there. And I have been for 15, 16 years or something. Yeah, big, massive UFC fan, and MMA in general. So, yeah. Oh, Silver was AKA Spider-Man. Yeah, the Spider. Okay, yeah. The Spider, Anderson Silver. Yeah, fair enough. Thundercats. You're just randomly saying cartoon names, Michael Black. Thundercats. Does anyone remember Captain Caveman? That was one of my favorites. I did like Thundercats and the X-Men. They've redone the X-Men recently, X-Men 97. I've watched the first couple of episodes. It's a little slow for me. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels like, hurry up. Like they're taking too long to build the storyline. So I know what the storyline is, just get into it. Get into the fighting and killing each other and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, the Spider, Anderson Silva, and he used to wear the bee, the yellow and the black trunks with the bee on his thing. But yeah, what an amazing fighter he was. I was never a fan of Silva though. I don't know, just something about him I just don't like. The guy himself is very nice. I just don't like his style. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I think when he was dominant in the middleweight category, in the middleweight division, I think the middleweight division was probably the thinnest that it's ever been. And by the time anyone was sort of relevant as a contender, you know, then the next match they're getting is against the absolute legend of Anderson Silva. So you're getting matches like Patrick Cote or what was the Damian Maia, you know, guys who it's not that interesting of a match, really. Like, why are you putting these guys against each other? Well, there isn't anybody else in this division. Okay. So, yeah. But credit to Anderson Silva for, I mean, that's the people he had to face, and he fought them and beat them. Well done to him. It was great to see Michael Bisping get a win over him. Captain Caveman. Yes, that's right. The old cartoon there. And the Snorks. Does anyone remember the Snorks? It was sort of similar to the Smurfs, but they were all underwater and they had snorkels on top of their heads, which, thinking about that now, probably looked bad in terms of the animation. Depends where they put the snorkel. Maybe it's on top of the head, because you wouldn't want it coming out of the forehead. I have to go back and watch that. Maybe that was like an inside joke that they had. None of the kids would get this, but they're all going to look like they've got snorkels hanging off their forehead. Yes, all right. Well, I might wrap things up here, guys, in a couple of minutes. Probably give it another 5. And any questions or anything? Snorks were Kmart Smurfs. Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The Kmart Smurf. Yeah. If there's any questions at all, anyone interested in anything that happened on the weekend or any upcoming matches, I'll see if I can give you my opinion on it, but I'll probably go for another couple of minutes. We're heading up towards the picking up the kids from school time. So it's 2:30 in the afternoon here. Snorks were cool. Shout out to Fraggle Rock too. Yeah, Fraggle Rock, down at Fraggle Rock. Yeah. I didn't love Fraggle Rock. It was all right. The Muppets. What was the Muppet one? They had the band. The Muppets were like in a band or something. Kid Muppets or something. I don't know. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. Fraggle Rock. Yeah. Jeez. The Snorks. Captain Caveman. Yeah. It's funny, like, as a kid, you know, growing up, these cartoons felt like they were absolutely amazing, and then you had all these amazing memories. And you go back and watch it now, and you're like, this is terrible. This is so bad. It's like the animation is obviously like the same frames they've used over and over. It's like their walking frame, and it's like the background is the same everywhere they go. Yeah, great. The Muppet Show, all good. Animal, yeah, that's probably the one. Popeye versus all of the Rugrats. WAL rule set. Popeye all day would win over the Rugrats. Rugrats are kids; they're like babies. Is it Chucky and Angelica? Yeah, Popeye would destroy everybody. He has the biggest forearms in the world. The Muppet Show, yeah, so great to remember all those. Voltron was one of my favorites. Voltron and Robotech. If you guys ever saw those ones, but Voltron was the 5 robot things. They were robot cats or something, and they all joined together to become the Voltron thing with the sword. And then what was it? Power Rangers did like their version of that. Interesting fact for you guys here. The Power Rangers TV show was a Japanese show, and all of the scenes where the Power Rangers are wearing their costumes for the American version of Power Rangers, all of those scenes were from the Japanese show. The only scenes that they filmed in America were the ones with the actors where they didn't have the costume on. So they filmed a lot of fighting scenes and stuff with the actors, but none of the scenes where they had the mask on. That was all from the actual other show, which I didn't realize, but it was quite interesting. Voltron Lions, yes, there you go. And they had the vehicle version, not as good. Oh, they have a vehicle version. I had a couple of the toys when I was a kid, but it was super expensive to get all of them. Like you had to get the black one was like the biggest one for the centerpiece, and it had the head, and then the others were like, the arms and the legs. But it was it was just ridiculously expensive to get all 5. And then if you knew somebody who had the green one and someone else who had a pink one or whatever, and it's like, oh, let's get together and we'll build Voltron, and at lunchtime you can have Voltron for a little while, and then you got to take them apart again. Robotech, Macross Saga, etc. all still good today. There's a Netflix DreamWorks remake of Voltron. Okay, didn't know that. There you go. I liked Voltron. I thought it was great. The producers and writers of kids shows back then were definitely on some mind-altering substances. Absolutely, and that's why they were great. Yeah, for sure. It is fun to go back and watch all those things. Pugwash. Captain Obvious versus Captain Pugwash. I don't know who Captain Pugwash is. That's not one we had over here. That might be a UK-only cartoon. We had Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse was there. The Drew says, I got a full Voltron as a kid, but it didn't come with a sword. That's insane. What a ripoff. Did it all come at once, or did you have to get each piece individually? Because when we had it here in Australia, it was that you could only buy each piece individually. Didn't come with a sword. Outrageous. I bet you put your own sword in there, as in you made like a stick or something into a sword, and you're like, this is now his sword. Captain Pugwash, never heard of him. Danger Mouse, we had Astro Boy. If you remember Astro Boy, that was quite good as well. Speed Racer. What else was there that was classic? Braveheart or something. No Captain Pugwash. No, I don't think we ever saw that. No way you guys missed it. It ended up banned as it was too rude, but it took years. Wow, yeah, no, never heard of that one. Came at once. Oh, it all came at once. Okay. Well, you should have asked for the sword to come with it, Drew. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap things up here, but thank you again for popping in. It's always great to chat to everybody. And I'd love to give sort of a platform for people that, if you're in watching the arm wrestling buzz and you've got 200 people that are into arm wrestling, it's like, well, come over and hang out over here if you want to continue the chat. So good to have everyone in here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.